Queensland's booming coal seam gas industry is spreading into coal-rich rural New South Wales, and the alarm bells are ringing for farmers. One of the commonest concerns is that independent science has not been able to keep pace with the rapid development of CSG, particularly its long-term environmental impacts. Well, that's about to change, with the CSIRO collaborating in a new research program with industry. The announcement came as the Senate Committee into the industry's impact on the Murray-Darling Basin arrived on the Darling Downs.
Given the extraordinary prosperity coal seam gas is and will bring to rural and regional communities, you could be excused for wondering why it's not been universally welcomed.
I feel that this is a community issue, and it's not just...
The fear, anxiety and anger about CSG in the prime farming and grazing country here on the Darling Downs has been so intense it's turned farmers into activists and made allies of old foes, farmers and environmentalists.
We've been on opposite sides of the fence on the various issues over the years.
Queensland rural lobby group AgForce says there are good reasons farmers are anti-gas, from low-ball compensation to the intimidating way some companies negotiate land access. But most of all, it says farmers are unconvinced by government and industry assurances that when 40,000 gas wells are drilled and billions of litres of salty water brought to the surface, that precious underground aquifers, the Great Artesian Basin and quality farmland will not be irrevocably harmed.
No one knows what goes on underground in the detail that we need for this industry to go forward. The few scientists that are around that do have a reasonable understanding of the underground systems are saying, you know, they're really ringing the alarm bells.
The state government and federal government now have allowed an uncontrolled experiment to be conducted out there on the Darling Downs.
We're sitting on underground water aquifers here that must be protected at all costs.
Last year, Queensland's then Minister for Mines, Stephen Robertson, insisted there was adequate protection.
At the heart of every decision that I take is my judgment about what is sustainable, what is in the best interests of Queensland, economically, socially and environmentally. That view is not just mine, it's shared by many, if not all of my colleagues who sit around the cabinet table.
So you're not tempted by the bucks?
No.
The industry's Achilles heel, though, has always been the lack of independent science about its impacts. But that's changing.
So what we're launching today is an opportunity to inform the public debate and increase the area of common ground. The Gas Industry Social and Environmental Research Alliance will help fill the knowledge gaps. It's a chance to increase the evidence-based understanding of what we're dealing with.
Industry giant APLNG kicked off the new CSIRO-led Gas Industry Social and Environmental Research Alliance, or JSIRA, with a $10 million cheque.
I believe this alliance is a great step forward in demonstrating that the gas industry can bring many joint benefits to regional Queensland and their communities. Thank you. We felt and feel that there's a need for some credible independent research into different areas to help inform policymakers and our own decisions.
Do you think it will cut back on the criticism of the industry with CSIRO's involvement?
Well, we hope so, that with time, that as we get greater information and sharing and get the debates focused on the real issues, it's bound to create a better dialogue, which hopefully will be more constructive.
CSIRO will contribute $4 million to what it says is a groundbreaking alliance. JSIRA will research the social and environmental impacts of the CSG boom.
There will be some days that I'm sure when we present scientific information that there will be some stakeholders that aren't happy. What's important is that our researchers absolutely hold fast to the integrity of excellent science.
Is $14 million enough?
It's a start. It's a start to get going, and I'm sure that's only the beginning. There'll be a lot more come in.
There are already 2,700 gas wells in Queensland, supplying 90% of the state's gas and 15% of its electricity. Paige Maxson denies this new commitment to research comes years too late.
It's not an unknown science, which is sometimes portrayed, but it is going to a new level of industry with the LNG projects coming on, and so there's clearly continued advancement in new issues of a multi-decade industry that we need to be working on together.
Senator Bill Heffernan chairs the Senate committee investigating the coal seam gas industry. He reckons Jazeera is long overdue.
We've let the animal loose before we've understood what the animal's going to do to us, and it is a pity that this didn't happen 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, it's to be applauded, but I don't know how we're going to make good some of the damage that's potentially in the pipeline.
Dalby grain grower Ian Haylor agrees with the senator that Jazeera's late, but better late than never.
We want credibility in science, we want independence in science. And landholders will understand those organisations and will sort of take more notice of them rather than a research purely funded by a gas company that has obviously got a vested interest in getting the right answer.
Ian Haylor came to Australia for a holiday in 1980. The English farmer liked Queensland's sun and blue skies so much he stayed. He didn't know when he moved here, though, that his 3,000 hectares of cotton and grain country sat atop a massive coal deposit.
We've got sort of 5 separate blocks of land, and on one of them we've got a proposed open-cut coal mine. And then on the other farms we've got a small area with QGC and the balance is with Arrow.
What's the time frame for the 2 gas companies?
QGC are talking to us about putting wells on one of our properties right now.
How do you feel about that?
I'd sooner they didn't come on our property because one of the gas wells is going to be halfway up our driveway on the way up to the house, so every time you drive past it, unless the compensation package is good, I'm going to be very cranky and never going to accept it being there.
Ian Haylor is one of the farmers out this way who's become, reluctantly, a CSG activist. He chairs the Basin Sustainability Alliance.
Anna Bligh was announcing all these projects, multi-billion-dollar projects, and how great it was to the state, how it's going to make so much in royalties and create so many jobs, but never once mentioned the environmental impacts, and that really concerned us.
He says locals have put thousands of hours into the organisation.
I used to enjoy being a farmer, and for the last 12 to 18 months I've been virtually full-time on gas. And we shouldn't have to do that. I mean, we should be producing food for the world. We should be channeling our energies into that, not into trying to basically correct a major stuff-up by the state government in issuing all these permits and licences for these industries to go ahead without fully understanding the long-term impacts.
He was happy the Senate inquiry was on and that it would take evidence in Queensland.
I think it's great. I mean, you know, we've been crying out for both the state and federal government to take notice of the community concerns.
What will your message be to the committee today?
That this industry has got to be regulated to a point where it has no long-term impacts on the groundwater system.
It's important that witnesses...
Ian Haylor got to say his piece about the biggest energy industry development to ever take place in Australia.
The coal seam gas industry is taking place at breakneck speed, and the state and federal government are playing catch-up. Living in the middle of a rapidly developing coal seam gas field is not a great place for agriculture to be.
Farmers out here rely on underground water to irrigate and for stock and domestic supply. They're pleading for increased protection.
I'm concerned government will place royalties and jobs above water security. The mitigation of impacts must start at the beginning of the projects and not once impacts are observed. At present, the government is promoting the make good provisions to protect the community's access to water, but we see this as a suck it and see approach.
Under the rules, if gas mining affects farm bores, companies must make good. It's a rule farmers are really struggling with.
The make good provisions require the CSG company to make good those impacts by deepening the bore, drilling a new bore, bringing in water from elsewhere or providing compensation. The CSG industry is only going to be around until 2045. Where will my substitution make good water come from after 2045?
The senators struggled with the concept too.
I mean, it really is an ongoing experiment for the future, and you're worrying about making good. Well, the making good, according to the CSIRO, could take 250 years.
We've been pretty busy fighting drought and the like the last decade to pay it too much attention. That changed a couple of months ago when we were approached by a mining company.
Remember this woman? Just as she held this crowd, so she held this room.
I have young children. My son is 4. If he wants to farm when he's older, he'll only be 38 in 2045. What is going to happen then? After the region has sustained the world's largest single drawdown of groundwater in history.
Ruth Armstrong said it was galling for farmers who pay for water that CSG companies had unlimited access to it.
I think that there's some laws that still need to be changed.
That was the thrust of Dalby lawyer Peter Shannon's evidence. Gas is so big out here, he's made a career out of it. He used to be a commercial litigator. Now he and 2 other lawyers work full-time on CSG. He says farmers don't just fear for the environment and their farms, they fear dealing with big gas.
Royal Dutch Shell is the 5th largest company in the world. PetroChina has a market capitalisation of some $1 trillion. Those are the companies behind Arrow. Petronas is the 95th largest company in the world and it owns Santos. And the BG Group has a market capitalisation in excess of $80 billion. In a nutshell, you're expected to negotiate with huge companies with no commercial clout whatsoever, and all this occurs in a framework where the company can simply enter your land after 50 days' notice, regardless of whether or not you've reached agreement. There are many landowners of advancing age, of limited understanding, or just overly trusting and compliant. Companies do occasionally take unfair advantage of that.
Isn't that just a way of ambushing people? Instead of riding into town on horses, now they come in Toyota Land Cruisers?
People are also concerned about recrimination. In the sense that if they're a problem to the companies, do they get a more dense gas field?
The threat of intimidation is pretty well right across the board out there in the bush.
Yeah.
And I have to say to those people, we only need to hear a whisper about that if they give evidence and someone's head will come off.
Peter Shannon wants federal consumer protection laws extended to cover gas contracts.
Specific protection for CSG dealings would ensure good behaviour by the companies. It would also enable ACCC to intervene as necessary.
When the committee reached Roma, it was as much about water as impact on farmland.
We don't understand why the coal seam gas industry has been given free rein to the Great Artesian Basin.
The reason I sit here before you today is also because of concern for the Great Artesian Basin.
In some ways, it's been like a gold rush mentality.
Some landholders are just signing the initial agreements because it all seems too daunting and they feel under immense pressure.
Committee member Barnaby Joyce has more than a passing interest in the coal seam gas gold rush. He's just discovered a company has rights over his farm in New South Wales.
We have seen people whose lives have been turned upside down, in some instances literally. We have to note that prime agricultural land, and that's not all land, it's a very select section of land, is our most precious resource in this nation. We can build another opera house if we really need to, we can build another harbour bridge, but we can't build more prime agricultural land, and that's what feeds us, and food's pretty important.
And it wasn't just a talk fest. The committee got a first-hand look at the prime agricultural land that could quite literally be under the pump. Their host was David Foote, boss of Australian Country Choice, which supplies 2/3 of the beef bound for Coles's eastern seaboard supermarkets. The Lee family started with 1 property and 3 staff 43 years ago. Now ACC is a fully integrated beef business with 29 cattle stations, 2 feedlots and an abattoir, employing all up 1,000 people. Soon they might have to make room for gas wells.
Each of these red dots, wherever they are, is going to have a pipeline for water and a pipeline for gas and a connecting road to service the pipelines and all the motors on each. So it becomes a massive infrastructure network of pipes and roads. So where the cattle go, where the farming goes, I've got no bloody idea.
So, Senators, the impact of coal seam gas, or whatever impact that is critical to the future and the tenure and the scalability of Australian Country Choice operations.
David Foote says as the rules stand, they'll be paid for the loss of small parcels of land, but not much else.
We'll never be able to compensate fully before, because how do you get compensation for tenderness?
Yeah.
Which is a measure of the beef that we provide put in those supermarkets across the eastern states.
He said even concern about the chemicals used in fracking could hurt his business.
So the unknown puts actually the whole Queensland beef cattle industry at risk.
ACC has the horsepower to hire lawyers to deal with the gas, but most farmers aren't so lucky.
Our property is our business and our home. It is everything that we have.
Kate Scott's husband John is a fifth-generation beef producer, and they fear what's coming.
We have many nights where we wake up in the middle of the night feeling this isn't the way we ever imagined it was going to be. I think it's the fear of the unknown.
This is the Scott's property, Brigadoon. The gas company with the rights to drill here has told the couple that within 3 years they will have installed 15 gas wells. They'll come with roads, underground pipelines and above-ground power lines. So far, the couple has been unable to get assurances that that will be the end of the gas development here.
If underground water is adversely affected with high salinity levels or chemical fracking contamination, we know that our land values will plummet. I don't think there's enough protection for the landholder. And so, yeah, the option is do we sell and go? Except I don't know that anyone would really want to buy our place at the moment.
There's gas development all around Brigadoon.
I now leave a dog off the chain at night if I am home alone, knowing he will bark and warn me if there's an unannounced visitor. Never has this been a worry of mine before.
After 2 days in the gas fields, the committee moved to Brisbane, where farm lobby groups jostled for their turn at the table.
Many farmers, like us, feel disempowered, outgunned, taken for granted, overlooked and disrespected.
The Queensland Farmers Federation says the scale and pace of development is unprecedented, leaving the state government struggling to regulate it.
In this regard, it's not hard to feel that not only has the horse bolted in this case, but the horse is well down the paddock and we're all looking around trying to work out who could have shut the gate.
The gas companies...
Drew Hutton is an environmentalist and serial Green Party candidate. He doesn't like what he sees.
The whole area looks like a pincushion, with coal seam gas wells, pipelines, service roads, holding ponds, the whole thing.
And says it will get worse.
The Murray-Darling Basin in Queensland is going to become an industrial zone, and it'll look like an industrial wasteland.
He's helped radicalise rural communities, and last year came up with a non-cooperation campaign.
About 1,500 farmers since then have taken up the call. They've locked their gates. They put a sign on the front gate. They've refused to negotiate with the companies.
The Lock the Gate Alliance has now moved into New South Wales, where there's growing alarm about the industry's imminent arrival.
It is not based on good science. It's based on a wish, that everything will go right, and that if it doesn't, we'll make good.
Maverick Liberal Senator Bill Heffernan was typically frank.
Man, this is an insult both to the producers of food, the planet, and to common sense. It is as if it is the Wild West. I mean, these guys are just scattered and gone and people are bewildered.
After so much negative input, the gas industry, through the Australian Petroleum Production and Exploration Association, got its right of reply.
This has attracted global attention in recent months, has seen the commitment of $31 billion in 2 Queensland LNG projects, with a further $30 billion worth of investment currently on the drawing board. In Queensland alone, this is expected to result in the creation of 18,000 jobs. It's a very large prize, but not at any cost.
And not at the expense of the Great Artesian Basin.
Impact is sustainable, and the monitoring programs proposed with hundreds of boreholes will ensure that the Great Artesian Basin is well managed.
It may be hundreds of years to repair all this for Mother Earth. What is the concept of make good? Okay. Like, we took evidence from someone who lost their stock in domestic bore water. How do you make that good with a cheque?
And Barnaby Joyce offered the industry this backhander.
These are marvellous statements, but for an industry that's going to be grossing about $8.5 billion, you're not paying out a hell of a lot, are you?
Now the committee turns its attention to New South Wales. Armed with first-person testimony calling for federal government to take over regulation of the industry, for tougher consumer protection laws, for better compensation deals for farmers, for the removal of confidentiality clauses from gas contracts, and for a blanket ban of CSG operations on prime agricultural land.
Are you hopeful that their report could actually influence the way CSG is regulated in Queensland?
People are more than hopeful. We actually need it to be. I mean, it'd be a disappointment for all the amount of effort that people have made to make their submissions and or even to come to these events, for it to be anything more than just a hollow report.
Do you think that it will carry much weight in Canberra?
I suspect it'll carry a lot of weight in Canberra. Whether it will carry the weight back through to Queensland will be the test for this process.
Ian Haylor hopes the result of all this talk will be a better deal for farmers and the environment.
I want to get to the point where I can actually drive past a gas well and smile and think, well, this, that's not a bad asset. It's the same. I want to have the same feeling with that gas well as I have with a 12 or 14 bale to hectare crop of cotton, that it's a good part of my business.
No wonder you want to move.
We're not willing participants in this. It's being forced on us, and that's the real issue, that, they're coming onto our properties and you've got to negotiate the best outcome, and that's just not the way we've ever done business before. This is a whole new ball game to us.